Hello and welcome to this week's Preps Preview. Alongside Justin Conn, I'm Aren Dow. We're almost near the playoffs. We've got a couple weeks left, and MacArthur had a big game last week against probably the best team in the Big 12, Normal. Normal got off to a real fast start. I know you were there to see that, and fortunately MacArthur couldn't get that fifth win, but what did you see out of them last week?
I didn't think that loss, just the loss itself, was as damaging as the Danville loss the week before. I think you kind of maybe penciled that one in as a possible L for them before. Yeah. But, it's just been a continuing theme these last 3 weeks is the fact that their defense is not playing well. And it really, all kind of, came to roost right there with just a really bad defensive game. They couldn't stop Normal at all. Offensively, they moved the ball. They had some big plays. There's a lot to be excited about there, but if you can't stop anybody on defense, and I think not being able to run the ball consistently hurts them a little bit too, because a bad possession, all of a sudden when you're throwing the ball 40 times is 3 and out, and if your defense isn't playing well, that makes it even worse. So, if they can run the ball a little bit better, and they're built to run the ball, right. So that's their system. So they have to do that well to succeed. You have to be enthused about the passing game, though. I think that's, if you're going to look for positives, that's something that they haven't had in recent years. Now they have to get the running game and the defense that they played the last couple of years back. There's still time. They can still make the playoffs. What comes in the playoffs might be tough, but there's still time to not let this become a forgettable season for them going forward, I think.
Right, and playing Urbana next week. Yeah, Alex Beckman, I think, is kind of that focal point of the offense, and he didn't play a little bit in the first half of the season. So kind of an up and down year for Urbana, really. They've had a really bad start of the season, and since then they've been pretty competitive in games. And yeah, like you said, I think MacArthur, they can get that running game consistently going. That was the big key in Danville too. They ran the ball really well in the first half. In the second half, things weren't opening up, and Jaquay Owens wasn't able to get to the outside as much, where he's really dangerous with the ball. I think if they can get that consistently going, that's the big difference for MacArthur.
They have Urbana and Bloomington to finish up 2 games. They could win both of them, yeah, or they could lose both of them. There's no, nothing written in stone with them right now. So that's going to be an interesting last couple weeks of the season for them. Also interesting last couple of weeks for St. Teresa and Monticello, 2 teams in the OCOB Black. St. Teresa just has to win this week against Sullivan, which it looks like they're capable of doing, and they will be at least a share of the conference title. So, this has been a pretty great turnaround for St. Teresa. And, they beat Clinton last week, not something it was a big surprise, but the way they beat them, which was the way an elite team beats teams. It wasn't one of these where they eventually wore them down or whatever. They blew them out from the very beginning, and I think St. Teresa is a team that's definitely on the rise from even from obviously from the preseason and then from the first few games to now.
Yeah, you look at they have pretty much all 3 facets. Shane Hawkins has returned touchdowns, I think, from the opening kickoff for 2 weeks in a row now. Adam Peters, is a guy who's able to make field goals, kind of a rarity here in the area. So you have the special teams. The defense has had 2 shutouts now, and the offense has been able to show that they can be able to put up points. So they really have all 3 facets that. If they get into a kind of bad position, there's always some way they can kind of get out of it, whether it's special teams, defense, or offense. They kind of have a complete package going.
Yeah, I agree. A couple other things I want to touch on from the last couple of weeks, or from this week. Arthur Levington got a nice win against Villa Grove. I thought that was their real first legitimate big win of the year. I think, and the way they won that game, they played really well. I think they're a team that could win a couple of playoff games. No question about it. They'll eventually run into somebody, like an Argentina. And that would be a game I would love to see between those 2 teams. And of course they'll be in the same conference starting next year. But this Argentina team is so senior led, and I just think that'd be a fun game. And we could see it'd be nice if that was like a round 3 game for sure. And I think both teams are capable of getting there.
Arthur kind of got that signature win there. They're kind of the opposite of what Sarah Gorder's schedule was, where Arthur's easy part of the schedule is in the first half of the season. Now they had a big win against Villa Grove. And then they played Bismarck-Henning week 9. So 2 more of the tougher games in the last half of the season. And I think, building on that and you kind of look at, if you're into comparing, what CGB did against Villa Grove and what Arthur did against Villa Grove, comparable. Even Arthur almost played a better game. So there's a lot of potential. And, like you said, having a couple playoff wins is definitely possible. They have a lot of explosive athletes that they're able to do that.
One quick note on last week as well. Newton upset Olney. I thought that was probably the biggest upset in our area this year. Yeah. Olney, that hurts because it could cost them a home game. It might not, but it could. It definitely is going to cost them, it's going to be a tougher opponent in the first round of the playoffs now. But you know what? Newton is coming. I mean, they had a freshman running back step up big. They had the sophomore quarterback and Brock Mimosa. They're playing a ton of young kids. So I think it's kind of fun to see them get that success. It kind of makes you know, yeah, this group's going to be special in the next couple of years. Yeah. Kind of like Tuscola in that way too, where these are teams that are coming. So definitely going to be fun. We want to talk about the Player of the Year race. We've talked about that a couple weeks ago. We wanted to kind of revisit that a little bit this week. And for me in the county, not much has changed. I think if anything, Jack Hockaday from Maroa has even made more of a statement. I mean, you can just look at his numbers up and down, sideways, and they're awesome. He has 31 total touchdowns.
39.
39 total touchdowns. I'm sorry, and he's throwing at 71% completion ratio, which is just insane. I mean, we have some good quarterbacks in our area. Nobody's even getting close to that, and he's got 130 some attempts. So it's really, insane what he's doing.
Yeah, I know Scott Ritchie put this out on Twitter last week, but he had 50 total last year. Hockaday had 50 total touchdowns, and he'll probably match that mark by the end of the regular season. Then he'll still have all the playoff run to go. If you haven't seen Maroa, go out and see him. Some of these weeks, because Jack Hockaday is a really special player. He's had a defensive touchdown. He's able to run the ball. He's able to pass the ball. What he's been able to do this season, and it's a shame because you have players like Steve Isbell who have put up crazy numbers this year. 200-yard games, multiple times. So many touchdowns. Austin Ray has been really good the last couple weeks, and they're getting overshadowed a little bit just because Jack Hockaday's had such a good season so far.
When we talked about this a few weeks ago, area was tough. I didn't really know who I was picking. I think that's become a little more clear now. Jared Pilson from Mattoon, he's thrown for 1,600 yards, 19 touchdowns, and he's led Mattoon to a 5-2 record. I think that's big. This is their best season in a while. So, he stands out. Tyler Schuring has quietly had a pretty good year for Arthur, but to me, Pilson's the man for sure as area player of the year right now.
And Jason Richard, from Robinson, who, they've only had one loss this season. He's able to, he's been pretty much their offense this year, been able to run the ball and do that week in and week out, had a lot of carries. I think, him and Pilson, really, both those guys, kind of the focal points of their offense. And Mattoon's kind of turned around. They had a rough start to the season, but played a fairly tough schedule, and now they're, the best in the Apollo right now if you look at records. So, yeah,
no question. Real quick, we're going to do our top fives. My bottom two from last week lost, so it was kind of nice because I was kind of it gave me a chance to move some things around a little bit. First, I want to start with who I snubbed. We have two one-loss teams who I left off this. Monticello being one of them. I had them ranked. Maybe I'm mad at them or something for losing. I don't think that's what it is. It's just more, right now, if I'm going to take a team that I want, that's going to do something down the road, I want a team that can score a little bit, and Monticello's, it's a little, on and off for them right now. Robinson was the other team I left off. If they beat Casey this week, they're on. I'll find a place for them. But until then, they're not in my top five. Number five, I picked Arthur. They're 6-1. The only loss was to Cerro Gordo, so that's a fine year. I did put Argenta ahead of them. I moved them on to number 4 this week, even though they didn't really play that well against Meridian. But I like them going forward to have a nice year. Number 3 then is Casey Westfield. Maybe I'll think them number. Let's see how they play against Robinson this week. They might be able to unseat my number 2 Cerro Gordo Bement, and Merle Forsyth isn't going anywhere out of that number 1 spot. So that's mine.
Yeah, I have a couple. For the most part, I've had just top 5 all season, but this week I did do 2 more as well, and I put Robinson and Argenta. They're kind of the 2 that fell below that top 5, and I don't know why. I had Argenta in the top 5 2 weeks ago, and they really haven't shown anything differently the last 2 weeks. So, obviously the Maroa game, that's a tough game, and Meridian, they've been playing much better this season, as the season's gone on. So, but still a little unsure, that they've had some injuries and they've had, some things that they've had to overcome. I don't think they're a bad team by any means, but outside the top 5. Anyway, so top 5, Monticello. I know you talked about a little unsure. they're still averaging almost 30 points a game on offense. I think last week, it was just a bad week. I think, teams will have that during the season. I guess I'm kind of willing to overlook last week. Defense still played well, only allowed 7 points to Unity. 4, I have Arthur. Big win against Villa Grove last week kind of legitimizes, okay, they are a team that's able to put up 40, 50 points in almost anyone. It's not just, the teams that have the, 1-5 records. They can do it against teams like Villa Grove too. CGB I have at 3, KC at 2, and then Maroa at 1. And those 3, it's not like, yes, I think Maroa is kind of the clear cut, but between those 2 and 3, between KC and CGB, all really good teams in that. So it's real close to the top.
No question about it. And I say, Monticello doesn't have the offense. You know what? Defense really plays better. That usually does better in the playoffs anyway. You can have a team that struggles to score, but if you can really clamp down on defense, you give yourself a chance in some close games. Mm-hmm. So, and I've said that a lot over the years, so I did want to include it in there. But still, right now it does seem like maybe it's almost like the NFL where offenses are, kind of becoming the more dominant thing in high school football. Real quick, couple games to watch out for this week. We mentioned KZ Westfield and Robinson. That's going to be a great matchup. Both teams haven't had a ton of tests this year, so I think this is an important game for both of them. Win or lose, for either of them, it's going to be, kind of a measuring stick late in the season here. And then, of course, Mount Zion hosting Effingham. And this is probably the toughest of the 5 games, at least, that they come down the stretch with here.
It's a kind of our weekly Mount Zion watch after the 0-4 start. But yeah, I agree. Yeah, Effingham is kind of the toughest match that they've had since Mattoon. So Effingham, they really, the start of the season, the offense was struggling a little bit, and they picked it up since then. So, and likewise, Mount Zion's defense has, started out a little slow and picked up since then. So it'll be kind of interesting to see how that matches up too.
I still just every week, I look at Mount Zion, and I look at their opponent, and their opponent doesn't have Austin Ray.
Yeah. And
so I usually end up thinking Mount Zion's going to win that game. Yeah. So again, coming down the stretch here in the regular season for area football. Make sure to check us out on Twitter and on Facebook and, of course, on hrpreps.com and in print as well.